Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much for joining us on One. This is an initiative that we do in ISKCON Sydney to try and get to know more personally all of the sadhus who are visiting us to see how they can inspire us and so on. Just to start off with, I thought I'd ask a question that I'm sure you get asked all the time, but just if you could maybe tell us about your background growing up in Krishna consciousness.
Thank you, Tilak Prabhu, for having me. I'll definitely try to add value as much as I can through these questions and answers, but only as little as I know that I could speak about. Starting off with the background, nothing very tragic or dramatic. My parents came to Krishna consciousness in 1995, so I was 3 years old. So for me, it was pretty simple because they became devotees and then I just followed. I just grew up as a child in Krishna consciousness. We started off in Radha Ras Bihari temple in ISKCON Juhu in Mumbai. And for me, I would just say I was born with a golden spoon in my mouth because Krishna consciousness was a childhood activity. Just followed my mother followed my father followed his inspiration. I just ended up following my parents. So for me, it was pretty straightforward. But as far as my father or my parents are concerned, I would say it was quite a story, because they lived in Saudi Arabia in Riyadh, and as you know, it's a Muslim-dominated place. You know, you have friends who are from the Islamic background, and my father was working there. And you know, as Brahmanas, you have the sacred thread. So he would have his shirt on to work and he would have his sacred thread. And his Muslim friends would ask him, "Oh, you're having a sacred thread. You're a Hindu, by the way." He said, "Yes, I'm a Hindu." "So what does your Gita talk about?" My father had no clue, because we come from an Indian background, but he never studied the Bhagavad Gita. So his Muslim friends would discuss the Quran. You know, at lunchtime they would say, "Well, you know, this chapter, that chapter," and my father was clueless. So that's when he came home and he started telling my mom, "I think it's time we, being as Hindus, we try to read the Gita." But it never set in so seriously. By Krishna's will of providence, so to speak, I lost my paternal grandmother, my father's mother, in 95, and in Mumbai. And that fell like a bulldozer on his head emotionally. So my parents packed up the house in Saudi Arabia, and we came back to Mumbai. And he didn't know how to deal with this grief. So he asked his sister, "What keeps you composed? You know, we lost the same mother and you're composed, and I'm grief-stricken." She was a devotee, so she spoke about Krishna consciousness, and that inspired him. So out of the 4 classes of people who become devotees, I think my father was the one who was distressed. He lost his mother and he got Krishna, and they became devotees. And I just followed my parents. So for me, it was pretty simple.
We see many children who join ISKCON with their families don't necessarily keep such an intense sadhana or interest as you yourself do. Where would you attribute that specific inspiration to?
I would say 4 key points. First and foremost, again, my humble observation and opinion on the basis of what I have seen. Most parents want their children to be Krishna conscious, while they themselves don't invest enough time in themselves. So it's basically like, I as a parent want to be wishy-washy. I want to be a half-baked cookie, so to speak. But I want my son or my daughter to be full-on. I think the fruit doesn't fall very far away from the tree. So if parents invest in themselves, the kids will follow suit. I oftentimes say the secret of doing good to others is secretly doing good to yourself. So if the parents can secretly invest time in themselves, in their sadhana, and the kids observe how their parents are performing sadhana, I think they start with a very wonderful home atmosphere. They get this backing to perform their sadhana. So oftentimes parents end up telling kids that this is what you should do. But I say that kids don't learn by the ear, they learn by the eyes. So they don't hear necessarily what the parents say, but they definitely observe and see what the parents do. So I think in my case, my parents were very Krishna conscious. I would, first and foremost, out of the 4 points, I would attribute it to them. I would definitely give them my heart and soul credit for this. We lived about an hour away from the temple, and my father every Sunday would drive us 1 hour early in the morning at 6 o'clock, because we had to see Radha Ras Bihari when the curtains opened for darshan and for Guru Puja, and then Bhagavatam class, and then breakfast. That was like the Sunday schedule. And oftentimes I would be lazy. I would say, no, it's a Sunday morning, I want to sleep. And the routine my father had made is that 5 days for the school, Monday to Friday, Saturday 1 day for your family, and Sunday 1 day for Krishna. So that was, I think, what I grew up with. And I saw my parents perform bhakti. My father worked hard outside and got the money. And my mother was a housewife. And that helped me, because we got the inspiration from our father, and we got the cushion of emotional support from our mother, and both of them were very Krishna conscious. So that's first. If the parents invest in themselves in reading, chanting, and etc., the kids follow. That's one. Second, I would say I had a very wonderful school. You know, of course, I didn't realize that then, but some things are so beautiful only when you look back in time, you realize how beautiful they were. So it was a very traditional school in the sense that it wasn't a Gurukul. It was a normal, materialistic, quote-unquote, academic school with bullying, ragging, you know, movies, sports, everything going on. You know, the backbenchers, the front benchers, everything. But the most interesting thing about this school was it was backed with a Hindu management who were devotees of Satya Sai Baba. You know, so of course at that time we didn't realize. But the good thing about it was they brought in a book called Stotra Sudha, and there was a book compilation of Sanskrit prayers, and every morning for an hour we all had to assemble in a hall and chant those prayers according to the occasion. If it's Krishna Janmashtami, or if it's Rama Navami, we chant stotras for the specific deity. And right from childhood, so my tongue started getting used to chanting verses, you know, whether it's for Lord Shiva, or whether it's for Ganesh during Ganesh Chaturthi, or whether it's Dasera, or it's Navaratri, you know, for all the devatas, you know, the demigods as we call. But I think the school helped, that environment helped. I didn't realize it then. I was like, oh, every morning 1 hour, it's too much. But now when I look back, I think, you know, our personal investment as far as big things come in small packages. So every investment, every day for an hour, put in the spiritual credit so that I could now believe in the process. That was the second. The third, I would say, is the spiritual teachers that I received, the culture that I received. I gained supreme shelter from His Holiness Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj. He's the spiritual master of my parents. And right from the age of, let's say, 6, that's 97, 98, to 2006. So from the age of 6 to 14, I was very much under his care. You know, he would inspire me to learn shlokas. He would inspire me to play the mridanga. He would inspire me to sing Vaishnav songs. He would inspire me in so many ways. So he would every time come into the airport in Mumbai and he would say, so how are you doing? What are the newer verses that you memorized? What are the songs that you would want to offer? So I think that nourishment helped. And last but not the least, my Gurudev, Radha Govinda Maharaj's classes, Amarendra Prabhu's kirtans, the Siksha Gurus that I had, the friends that I made. I think that all instilled that faith in me, so that I could put more time in my sadhana and more faith in my process. So I think if every kid is endowed with this system, and they also need to put in their hard work, I think then this process will give them a lot of brownie points on the way.
You mentioned about how Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj cultivated in you attitude towards studying Shastras. Specifically for children, what would you say would be an appropriate way for them to start cultivating that Shastric study?
It depends on what age group you define kids by. Is there a specific age group that you're talking about?
Oh, well, I was thinking specifically in terms of what you mentioned, 6 to 14, but even beyond that, or even for adults in general.
Right. I think there are different strokes for different folks, as the saying goes. I always like to reflect on what happened to me. I can't prescribe, but I can definitely describe what happened to me. Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj instilled this culture of memorizing the special selected verses from Shastra. He would always say that Krishna's Uttama Shloka. Shloka means verses and Uttama means first class. So he is that Krishna who's always glorified in Goloka Vrindavan with the best sort of poetry. So the challenge for me was Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj would tell me every time I come, I want to hear verses. Also from my school, we would have this shloka memorization competitions, and every year we had different chapters of the Gita. So I think as a child, that definitely helps. As early as possible in life, one must instill time to memorize verses, because that's when our intellect is as sharp as possible. With time, the meanings of those verses can be explained, But I think the culture of memorizing verses brings in clarity in speech, brings in proper pronunciation, glorification of Krishna, and that stays as devotional asset. So that's definitely one thing. As far as children are concerned, I would definitely recommend verses first, and then as they equip their quiver with as many arrows as possible, then with time we spend time sharpening those arrows, teaching them which arrow to use at what time, and that helps. Even in life, when you're confused, these verses come to our rescue, and they give a power of discrimination that, this is what happened in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. This is what happened in, let's say, Jiva Goswami's life. And this is what they did. This is the verse that gives them light. So for kids, I would recommend that. Another thing as far as Shastric study I would recommend for kids is seeing as many stories. I had puppets shows at that time. I still remember I wanted to watch TV. As a child, I wanted some animation. We didn't, of course, have iPads and laptops at that time. So I wanted to watch television. So my parents would get me puppet shows and dramas and animated cartoons, and it helped. That's another way to be Krishna conscious and to get the stories right. Because in childhood, up to the age of, let's say, 8 or 9 or even 10, the philosophy doesn't set in so much. Like, you teach them about the 3 modes of material nature, you teach them about how the elements develop. It's too much. Sometimes it's too much even for the adults, right? At least in my case, it's too much for me. But I think that comes with maturity. For kids, teach them the stories, give them the moral lessons, give them the verses, give them the quick bits, give them the small packet snippets that they can carry in their life. That's as far as if they're very young. Now for someone, as you put in your second part of your question, someone who's an adult wants to start off, there are different techniques to do it. The first technique that they can start their Shastric study is, again, this is just my personal opinion. I wouldn't base it on a praman or a evidence for this. The first way to study Shastra in my limited experience is you read through all the translations first. Don't worry so much about the purport, don't worry so much about the verses. Read through all the translations to know what is there. Don't be overwhelmed with what's happening. The Sanskrit words, the word to word, then the translation, then the purport. I have to finish so many chapters in a canto, then 12 cantos in Srimad Bhagavatam, then Chaitanya Charitamrita. Don't worry about it. Don't think of finishing a book. Enjoy the process. Don't get into a PhD program thinking, when am I going to be out of it? You'll never finish. It'll be a burden. Get into it just to research and relish the process. So the first technique would be just read through all the translations. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about anything else. Just get to know what section of Shastra is there in which canto of the Bhagavatam. Now once you've done with that, the second step I would say is get on to the key verses in each chapter to see if there are some prayers that have been offered that you can relate to in your life. Like for example, in Chaitanya Charitamrita there is a very beautiful verse. Kamadinam katina katidha palita durnideshas tesham jata maina karuna natrapano pashantihe Utsrujjaitan atha yadupate sampratam labda buddhi tvam mayat sharanam abhayam mam niyung shvatmadasye. Now this verse can be related to each one of us. What it means is that, oh Krishna, I have a boss called lust. And he's an interesting boss. He gives me so much work. And I overwork. And I love to work for him. And the interesting thing is, at the end of this work, I feel guilty. And he doesn't pay me anything. And every time he gives me more work and I slip again and again, he doesn't pay me, I don't feel happy, and he doesn't take the guilt. Even after all this, oh Krishna, I have not given up this job. I've not rejected, and I've not given my resignation, because I don't have any other master, any other job. Now that Krishna, I've realized, you're another recruiter who gives jobs. I want to take the job, the service at your lotus feet, so that I can kick this job. And I don't have to worry about lust anymore. So that would be an approach. You go to different verses of different chapters and pick out prayers that you can relate to, that you can relate your life to Krishna. Call out. Or verses which describe Krishna, with his beauty. So many verses describe Krishna's form. Barha pidam natavara vapuho karnayo karnikaram bibhratvasa kanaka kapisham vaijayantim chamalam randran venu adara sudaya purayan gobhavrindaye vrindaranyam swapada ramanam pravishad gita kirtihi. Oh, how beautifully Krishna plays the flute. How he has tucked his dhoti to the side. Oh, how beautifully he smiles. How beautifully he glances. So these verses can act as meditation. You're sitting in your car in the middle of a traffic. You don't know what to do. You just chant the verse and remember the meaning. So that's a quick cloud of shower of remembrance. So that's another way you could do it. Then after you finish this approach, you go through the translation. Then the second approach is through the verses. The third approach could be when you go really deep, every purport, focus, and take jewels out. People oftentimes think, this purport is so heavy, I feel like it's similar to the previous purport. But I would oftentimes say, take a pencil, and before the start of purport, write your name. Dear Amarendra Das, please accept my blessings. As if that portion of the purport is a letter from Prabhupada for us. So say, Dear Amarendra Das, please accept my blessings. I did receive your letter dated, let's say, 9th October 1968. And this is my response. And that's the purport. And your ever well-wisher, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. How invaluable would that letter be to us? We would keep it in our room. Prabhupada wrote this letter for me. Interestingly, he has written more than 18,000 letters for us. But it's just the lack of connect with Shastra. So I think little steps every day. There are different techniques like that. Even if one starts with 15-20 minutes, when one does it for 5 years, when one looks back, it's a wonderful asset. Oftentimes people get bowed down, there's so many books, I can't finish them. Don't worry. Don't worry about it. You're going back home, back to God if you take the essence and practice it, which Prabhupada has given in all the books. Take smaller steps. Go deeper. Don't spread thin, but go deep, So that would be my approach to slowly but surely giving time to Shastra and study, Yeah.
And then that's for someone beginning with Shastric study, and obviously that's most of us, but just maybe to see what's for us at the end of the tunnel. You've got such an amazing erudition when we hear your katha and classes. How personally do you study yourself beyond those sort of initial stages?
One thing that helps me is always writing. There's a saying that in the olden times, people would remember everything on their mastak. Mastak means the forehead. But now in Kali Yuga, the mastak is getting weaker. So you need a pustak. Pustak means a book. So for those who can't put it on their mastak, they need a pustak. So that's most of us. I love to write. Therefore, in all my travels, I keep books. I keep pen. Whatever I hear, sitting in somebody's class, write. There's definitely jewels that he's going to speak in that 1 hour. Oftentimes we think, I know this. I know this. What is he going to teach me? I know this. And I think that thought process blocks us from the messages that Krishna wants to give us that day. Every morning Krishna wants to speak to us. He's a very talkative guy. You know, Mother Yashoda has problems because he's always talking on the streets of Vrindavan. So he loves to talk to us. So every morning Krishna has messages. So I think when you sit in somebody's class, the openness to hear that it's not him speaking, Krishna speaking through him to me. And even if we know something that he's saying, the interesting thing is it's a good way to recapitulate it. That's one. Secondly, he's going to speak things that I didn't know. And if I walk out of that class saying that I knew everything and I didn't gain anything new, it only shows that we were inattentive. Because if we are attentive, there's at least one thing that he will tell you that you didn't know. You know? So I think to catch those things, it's always good to have a notebook. So I keep different notebooks for my study. One book is just a shloka book. It's a small index card that I carry in all my travels. It's a small pocket book. Only so much, with let's say 100, 150 leaflets in that. And back and forth I have verses. So if you're giving a class and you say a verse which inspired me, which I had not heard, I would try to write it down. And then try to use it as much as possible. In America there's a saying, if you don't use it, you lose it. But they of course say it in a negative way. But for us, if you don't gain something and you don't use it, or let's say if you gain and you don't use it, you lose it. So gaining those verses, and that's a shloka book, you know, writing them down. Another book I keep for my study of Srimad Bhagavatam. Whatever juicy stuff that I get from the purport, from the translation, from the verses, I keep it there. Another book I just have for the classes. If I'm hearing some audio classes, you know, or in live classes. So the first book is a shloka book. The second is a book for the books of Srila Prabhupada, you know, the writing. The third is for the classes, section by section, live classes, audio classes. And the fourth one is the commentaries of the Shastras. Like you see, there are Goswami books that have been presented by the BBT or disciples of Srila Prabhupada. Like the Sarartha Darshini is a series of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary that's been presented by Bhanu Swami. Also Krama Sandarbha of Jiva Goswami. That's again, these are all commentaries on the Srimad Bhagavatam. So I keep it for that. I study all these books there and I write it down. So if I have to focus on Prabhupada's purports, I know where to go. But if I know something that has been given by the predecessor acharyas, I know where to go. If I'm searching for verses, topic-wise, I know where to go. So in that way, I think it helps me put my thoughts in different themes. And I think, as Albert Einstein said very famously, that a clustered table only represents a clustered mind. Meaning, if our notes are clustered, I see some devotees, they put in the hard work, but it's not organized enough. So they can't go back to find where it is. Like in the first 10 pages, you have verses, and then another 10 pages, you have something else, and then another 10 pages, you write some other class. Not like that. You want a proper organized fashion, you know, and it gives very good returns and results. So I think that helped for me, and I'm very positive, coming from the academic background, that will help everyone. The more organized we are, the more streamlined and narrow focus down approach that we can have towards Shastra, I think that gives good results and returns.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. There's two specific questions that are coming to my mind, but I'll start off with the first one. You mentioned about listening in Bhagavatam class, and to sort of flip it around, we often hear not only your erudition, but your clarity when explaining and teaching. I find for many people, we read, but then it's hard to then explain. How do you personally try to present things in such a communicable manner?
I think for me, I would see myself as someone who is not very intelligent, because even in school, I was pretty average. I wasn't a very bright student, I would say. You know, definitely not an A+, you know. I was maybe somewhere at either A- or B+. So that was where I was. And it took me some time to understand and retain stuff. So I think I always try to see the audience I see numerous Amarendras sitting there. Because I knew that if the teacher said something like this, I wouldn't understand. I would understand when the teacher told me this. So that's how I try to explain when I'm trying to speak. Sometimes it's like, I have had people who come to me and say, why do you repeat that so many times? We got it in the first go. Why did you repeat that 4 times? And I beg forgiveness. I said, I'm really sorry. But I know why I'm doing that. Because I know if I was sitting there, I wouldn't get it in the first go. I need that repetition. I need that, a presentation and then tying it back to a certain point, an application, and towards the end summarize all the different discussion points. So I think I just try to see how I would process it, and being pretty dull and average, it takes some time for me, and it takes a certain approach for me. I had many teachers in school, but only a few favorites, because they did it in a way that I could understand. And I think I seek their inspiration and do it the way they do it. You know, you teach a class, you make them repeat a point. Oftentimes I try to do that, you know, because during school days, I remember when the teacher is speaking, I'm spacing out. I'm either sleeping, looking outside the window, I have no clue what's happening. But if the teacher says, okay guys, please repeat this, and then I'm like, okay, here I am back in that classroom. So I think I try to do that. Repeat a certain verse, repeat a certain point, repeat sayings. Not that I think of myself as a teacher, but I think of myself as someone who would want to help another 20 Amarendras sitting in the audience. So I think that helps for me. The way I could process, that's the way I'm trying to present.
And my second question that came up was, you mentioned academic background, and that's something that's, I know, very inspiring to a lot of the youth who are also in university. How personally do you manage devotional and university life?
Very honestly, it's tough. But when the going gets tough, the tough gets going. You know, life is not easy for anyone. I see those with corporate life. They have 2 kids. They work a full-time job. They take care of their wife. They take care of their house. They take care of their kids. They drop their kids to school, pick them up from karate class. And apart from that, they come to the temple. They have devotees. They also run Bhakti Vrikshas and are Bhakti Vriksha leaders as preachers. So I think to myself, that is how hard Grihasthas are working. And I don't have a family in the sense I'm not married. I don't have kids. I don't have a house. I don't have a full-time job. You know, I don't have to pick kids from karate class, at least at this point. So I shouldn't complain. There is absolutely no point of complaint. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for everyone. It's tough for everyone. My mother is a housewife. It's tough for her because life comes with challenges. So I think it's tough. But the way I always did is maybe I was too old school. Maybe I was too fanatical. Maybe, I'm sorry, I beg forgiveness from those watching this video if this is going to sound really far out, really out of the box. But I didn't entertain friends who were not Krishna conscious. I didn't try to change myself to fit a group. I think most kids, again coming back to your previous question, even in the Krishna conscious upbringing, I think the mistake that we do is we lack faith in the process. Therefore, we get dilute and we try to move like the water through the rocks in the flow of the river while being outside. We get influenced by everyone. You know, if my friend around is speaking about movies, I downgrade my consciousness to talk about movies, to have a friend. When someone else is talking about women and drinks and, you know, let's say prostitution or God knows what not, you know, football. And I know I'm wasting my time, but then I am still agreeing to come to his level and to do that. Well, that's good if you know that that person is a little soft and you can cross the bridge, hold their hand and get them back to Krishna consciousness, then it's fine. But if you know that that person is pretty antagonistic, he's pretty averse to this process, then there's no point downgrading your consciousness to connect with him, you know. So this was my policy. Even in my undergrad, I was like a sword. in the sense that I immediately, first 2 months of my undergrad, I didn't speak about Krishna consciousness. I was just trying to observe who's what, who's speaking what, what's the background. And then I would see 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the 4 people that I see who are soft-hearted, who are ready for Krishna consciousness. I would kick the rest and attack. Give Krishna consciousness, share Krishna consciousness with them, share my slides, share Prabhupada's books, take them to the temple. And lo and behold, they would become Krishna conscious. I think this focus is important. So that helped me save a lot of time. I'm just coming back to your question. That helped me save a lot of time, because on one side is academic commitments, on the other side is Krishna conscious practice. Why is it tough to manage? Because we have a lot of gray area in the center where we waste time, which is neither materially beneficial, not spiritually uplifting. So I think that's where I saved time. And I continue to do that my undergrad and both my masters. Masters in electrical engineering from Massachusetts, masters in business administration, and MBA. It's pretty mixed an audience, but still I try to maintain that sort of discrimination as this will take me materially ahead, no problem, I'll associate with him. This person is ripe for Krishna consciousness, I will associate with him. This person is wasting my time with neither of this. Hare Krishna. I will respect him, but I will not give him my time. I will not hang out with him. And they slowly but surely they start accepting you for who you are. And in that way, you can prioritize your life. Why give the key of your life to someone else? Why should they control where you go? So we prioritize. Early morning, Krishna consciousness. All day, material life. Evening, Krishna consciousness. This is the sandwich program. If you manage time, time manages everything. But failing to plan is planning to fail. That would be my advice. Time management with very sharp discrimination power as to where you invest your time. What is important? What is unimportant? What is urgent? What is not urgent? You just make that quadrant, and the quadrant which helps you to prioritize your tasks with importance and urgency. Go for it.
Wow. I was just wondering, you mentioned the degrees that you were studying. What specifically inspired those choices?
Interesting. As I was growing up in the loving care of Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj, Maharaj always would say that I want Amarendra to be a scientist. I want him to be a scientist. I want him to get into the scientific world. So as I was growing up, engineering was something that was interesting, because as you know, in India you have only 2 careers. You either become a doctor or you become an engineer, and I think between the two I preferred being an engineer. And there also I had some discussions with my father, and my father said electrical engineering is something that is evergreen. It's never going to fade. That's like the fundamental, rudimentary, elementary section of all engineering. So why didn't you go for that? And I went for my bachelor's. It was pretty interesting. Went out for my master's, and this university in Massachusetts offered me a full ride scholarship. So I got in there, pursued my electrical engineering. In fact, I got a job offer after that. It's pretty interesting. I got a job offer after my first master's, and they were ready to pay me good salary. But they said, we have a position of someone who can market electrical equipments, electrical products. So I said, okay, I'll try to do that, get into marketing. But then he said, for that, you have a master's from electrical engineering, which will teach you the technical side of the system. But where's the master's for your management, for your marketing skills? So if you do an MBA, then you can come back and get this job. So that inspired me. Okay, no problem. Let me get into my MBA. And they said they will reserve the job for me even after I return. So as I'm graduating, that was my roadmap, so to speak. I didn't plan to do an MBA. I was ready to get into the job market after my first master's. But then they said, we need someone with technical expertise and non-technical expertise. So what if you proceed there? I said, sure. And Krishna wrote the script in some ways. Yeah. Also, it's pretty nice for me, because I want to use this as a medium to explain that Srila Prabhupada's movement is not a movement of those who are illiterate. We want to tell the world outside that we are presenting a philosophy not because we are retards. It's not that we are becoming devotees with kanti and tilak and dhoti because we couldn't get a job outside. We have 2 masters that you're aspiring for, but we still would vouch on this side and speak about this philosophy. So that's pretty impressive as a preaching tool. And I would inspire the youth, to go ahead and pursue your education, because that could be used as a lethal weapon in speaking and preaching Krishna consciousness. People introduce and say, here is a person who's a PhD, here is a person who's a postdoc, here is a person who has a graduate degree, and he's speaking about Rupa Goswami. So let's hear, So I think it helps in the spiritual and in the scientific communities.
Yeah, wow. Thank you so much again for joining us. We just have a few questions we like to wrap up with.
Sure.
The first is, within ISKCON, are there any projects or specific areas of interest that either strike up your passions or you feel you'd like to encourage devotees to take up?
Very nice. So oftentimes devotees are interested in outreach. There's always a focus about getting more numbers into the congregation. Preaching is always seen as someone who is getting newer men, expanding, touch newer souls, which is wonderful, I would say. We have to give Krishna consciousness to as many new people as possible. But my little project in myself, that would help me move ahead, or my thought process in inspiring other friends around would be, what's happening to the devotees who are already in the movement? Who is nourishing them? If we are interested in, spreading ourselves out thin to get, the drowning souls in, what's happening to those who are already devotees? They get through no meat eating, no intoxication, and the 4 regulative principles and 16 rounds. They get initiated. They get their second initiation. They chant their Gayatri mantras. What happens after that? There's a point of stagnancy. There's a point of, I can't taste anything more. As a result of which, other streams of darkness in the form of criticism, fault finding, management issues, politics, ulterior desires stream in because there's lack of light. Prabhupada in 1972 said, we have enough members in the movement, now it's the time to boil the milk. So I think my little project would be to boil the milk, to share Prabhupada's books, share Krishna Katha among those who are devotees already, which will keep them, connected with our philosophy. If you're having admission for newer and newer kids into the school, but your school is only offering up to, let's say, 4th grade, all of them whom you're going to get in are just going to graduate up to 4th grade. But if you invest in making that 4th grade into 10th grade, building on the kids who are already with you, then the future kids can also graduate up to 10th grade. So I think as an instruction that I received from my Gurudev, Srila Radha Govinda Maharaj, is also to speak and inspire the devotees who are already Krishna conscious, so that they don't leave ISKCON, they don't get sidetracked, they don't lose faith in the process. So I travel around trying to speak Krishna Katha in temples, in congregations. There are enough people to do bridge preaching, there are enough people to do far out preaching. How many of them are committing themselves in speaking Krishna Katha to devotees? And Krishna says in the Gita, Ya idam paramam guhyam mat bhakteshu abhidasyati. Anyone who speaks this philosophy to my devotees, they're very dear to me. So as important is the outreach, so equally important is boiling the in-reach. You have to nourish those who are in-house so that they go out and bring in more for us. As Virgin Atlantic CEO Richard Branson very famously, in his talks, he says this point that if you invest more in your men, they will invest their time in bringing you profits. Don't use your men to bring in profits. Invest in them. Let them be comfortable. invest your time and care and love and affection in your men in Virgin Atlantic. They will bring in the profits for you. They will feel job satisfaction. So I think if we as devotees can bond amongst ourselves through Krishna Katha, through Krishna Kirtan, and really feel the joy of Krishna consciousness, then I think we'll have more soldiers to do the outreach. That's not a problem. The problem lies within. So I think that's a project that I am currently trying to engage in by the mercy of my spiritual master, and Krishna willing, would like to do it in the future.
Wow, thank you so much again for joining us. Just to end on a sweet note, which is not me speaking, is there a message you'd have for, a heartfelt message just for all of the devotees, not just in ISKCON Sydney, but worldwide?
I'm a small person to give a message, but I'll repeat something that Srila Rupa Goswami gives. So if that is okay, devotees can kindly memorize. It's a very sweet verse, and it shows our pathetic condition in this material world and how we should pray to Krishna. Manasi jafani jushte labdha patosmi dushte timira gahana kupe hanta sansara rupe ajita nikhila daksham hetum uddhara daksham upanaya mama haste bhakti rajum namaste. So it's a very poetic one. Manasi jafani jushte labdha patosmi dushte timira gahana rupe hanta sansara kupe ajita nikhila raksham hetum uddhara daksham upanaya mama haste bhakti rajum namaste. You know, so what it means is, Rupa Goswami says, Oh Shri Krishna. Rupa Goswami is giving a story. Oh Shri Krishna, there's a well, and in that well somebody has fallen. Now, having fallen into that well, he looks around for help, and there is a snake. Now he's stuck. He can't get out of the well, and he can't deal with the snake. Now he's crying out for help, and one person outside the well looks in, says, how can I help you? So this person in the well says, can you throw me a rope? I'll hold that rope tightly. You hold it tightly and pull me out. And he agrees. He throws in a rope close to this person's hand. He holds it, and the person outside pulls the rope out. Now what this story is about is very interesting. Rupa Goswami says, oh Krishna, this well is the well of repeated birth and death. I am that person fallen into it. The snake next to me are ulterior desires, selfish desires. They are biting me while being in this well. The only way I can get out is if someone outside the well, outside the cycle of birth and death, that's Krishna, puts a rope within, the rope of devotion, close to my hands. If I can hold it tightly, then he can pull me out. So basically, Krishna, I'm fallen. Please kindly bless me with the rope of devotion. I promise you I'll hold it very tightly, and then you pull me out. I'll get out of this material world. So in this mood, if devotees who are watching this can open their heart out and pray to Krishna, I think that'll be a good message to end with, because I'm no one to give a message, but that's a very beautiful message to conclude. Hare Krishna.